This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW. Written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 319, entitled Feminazis who remain monoconscious will lose their boyfriends who become biconscious. Description. This flyer describes one of my better ideas. It provides a strategy to destroy third-wave feminism by causing monoconscious feminazis to lose their male feminist boyfriends as these men become biconscious by being exposed to the media reports on masculist/MGTOW ideas. These men will then see their monoconscious girlfriends as monoconscious bigots, as callous and narrow-minded, and will dump them. As millions of men do this, third-wave feminism will die out as biconscious former boyfriends plunge a golden dagger into the heart of third-world feminism, killing it off, seen to be a hated, dangerous ideology by both sexes. So as not to lose their male support system for having babies, monoconscious feminazis will convert themselves into being biconscious gender libbers, so that the menfairing of the gender laws for men is made much easier, and whole populations need not be wiped out, as is currently happening as MGTOW and masculist men reject marriage and paternity that have been made so toxic by the hated monoconscious feminazis. On the flyer itself, click on the link. Feminazis who remain monoconscious will lose their boyfriends who become biconscious. By Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. As a masculist theorist, I'm constantly having ideas about masculism that I jot down in a notebook, write up flyers on them, and then make videos of me reading out loud these flyers to be uploaded to YouTube, Minds, BitChute. Most of these ideas, almost by definition, are just so-so. Some are rather dull, but occasionally I have an idea that later proves to have many and important repercussions, that is, significant consequences. For example, the last, in my view, really good masculist idea I had was to find a loophole, a means to get around the main argument that the apolitical, wimpy MGTOWs use to justify, rationalize, why it is a waste of time to be politically active, masculist style. That argument runs as follows. Even if millions of men become masculists and push the gender politicians to menfair the gender laws, for example, make the divorce courts fair to men, bring in the paternity rejection right, etc., they will not do it due to fear of being voted out of power by the female bloc vote. Women are 51% of the population, and a higher proportion of women vote than men. So the gender politicians fear them and do what the women want in order to stay in power. So any political effort expended by the masculists would, at the end of the day, be wasted effort, because the gender politicians will always favour the women who have the voting power. With hindsight, the easy rebuttal to the above reasoning is to cause a non-negligible proportion of women to become female masculists by threatening them with babylessness if they don't become biconscious, that is, become female masculists. Assuming, of course, that most of these women are already feminists, having previously had their feminist consciousness raised. If 10% of women become female masculists, then that would be 60% of the total voters, enough to force the gender politicians to menfair the gender laws. Women want to have babies more than anything else on the whole. So if men force them to choose between giving up their feminazi privileges in the divorce courts or having a baby, most women will choose to have a baby and hence give up their current divorce court privileges. Men can force women into babylessness by using MGTOW tactics, that is, just walking away from women, refusing to have relationships with them, or at a minimum, refusing to marry them, and certainly refusing to give them babies. Young women now are seriously starting to wake up that quality young men, that's the smarter men, the quality men, who are the first to go MGTOW because of their superior intelligence, latching onto new ideas faster than your average Joe, are refusing to give women their sperm, preferring to go their own way, rejecting marriage, rejecting paternity, and spending their money on themselves, eschewing fluffies, that is, traditional women who expect to be able to parasite off the money of a man, like the immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin that they are. Thus, masculism is seen by the masculist theorists as a superset of MGTOW and MRM, that's in brackets, men's rights movement, which uses the law to attempt to redress legal injustices against men. But since the MRM tends to take a poor me, the man, the victim approach to gender politics, most men don't identify with the MRM, since the poor me, the man approach goes against their cultural conditioning to toughen up and perform, in brackets. Masculists, of course, want the gender laws to be menfaired, so are MRMers in that sense, and they use MGTOW tactics to force women to FIP up, become FIPs, equals financially independent persons, or are punished by men by not getting one, forcing women to grow up, to become responsible adults, or rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and as masculinist ideas spread throughout the culture, spat at. The above refutation of the 51% voter argument of the MGTOWs by the masculists is one of the best ideas I've had, I think. But now I want to present to you another idea that I think has the potential to become as significant, as important as the above idea. Before I spell it out and label it, I need to give a bit of background so that its significance can be made clear. The hated feminazis have become indirect genociders. Indirectly, they are wiping out whole populations because in their female, 10% smaller brained short-sightedness, they've taken over the divorce courts and apply their monoconscious feminazi anger at men to crucify men in the divorce courts, tearing away a father's kids by giving sole custody of them to the ex-wife, with a 90% probability in many countries, forcing him to give his house to his fluffy ex, pay child support to kids he will barely see, lose half his possessions to his ex, and often be forced to pay alimony to his ex so that she can remain a parasite of him after the divorce as she was before the divorce, with no moral nor legal pressure on her to get off her fat parasitic ass and FIP up, that is, to become a FIP, an adult. Masculists are profoundly misogynist against fluffies, treating them as vermin to be exterminated by being totally ignored by men, shunned, spat at, forced to rot on the shelf to extinction, not even being pumped and dumped by men. Since most feminists know nothing about masculism and masculist ideas, they are, by default, monoconscious, that is, have had only their feminist consciousness raised, so are aware how men oppress women, e.g. resisting women entering the workforce, being prejudiced against women being promoted at work, etc. Monoconscious feminists are inevitably angry at men for having misogynist attitudes towards women. Since they know nothing about masculism, they are by definition monoconscious, hence gender biased, anger biased. They are angry at men for men's gender crimes against women, but know nothing about the reverse case, because masculism is too new for them. The media has yet to latch on in a big way to the importance of the masculist message, so nearly all feminists are monoconscious. Third-wave feminism evolved out of second-wave feminism. As a masculist, I'm in favour of second-wave feminism, that is, pushing for equal rights for women with men. For example, equal pay for equal work, equal opportunities to enter the professions, the right to reject an unwanted pregnancy, that is, the MARA equals maternity rejection right, etc. These second-wave feminist demands that women achieved largely in the 70s are seen by Masculists as prerequisites for women to be able to fip up, that is, become fips and not parasite off the money of a man. If I were a female, I would be a second-wave feminist. But things moved on. Young feminists are now into the third wave, pushing to empower women at men's expense, treating gender politics as a zero-sum game. That is, women's power gain is men's power loss. Third-wave feminists are as ignorant of Masculist ideas as their older second-wave feminist mothers, so have the same anger bias, the same gender bias as their mothers, which they take into the divorce courts. In the early 80s, when I was pushing the media in 7 countries in Europe in 4 languages on Masculism, I went to Copenhagen for the UN Mid-Decade for Women, which aimed to teach the world of the progress made with women's rights around the world, halfway through the Decade for Women, started by the UN in 1977. I went there to teach these women about men's lib. While I was there, I had an opportunity to chat a bit with Betty Friedan, or Friedan, the mother of second-wave feminism, via her famous book, The Feminist Mystique, which complained about the vacuousness of the suburban housewife role for women of the 50s, and the need for women to become careerists like men, to become fulfilled human beings. She struck me as a very reasoning and admirable person, who agreed with me that women's lib was only half the problem. She then went on to write a book about that idea, that men needed to be liberated as well from the manslave role of being a husband to a manslaving housewife, whom I call a fluffy, based on the word fluff equals light, not serious, not responsible, not adult, not career competent, not FIP. Friedan, ad-libbing now, I think that's a change. There are a lot of German Americans in World War I who changed their names a bit. So Frieden with an EN at the end is a German word meaning peace. So I guess one of her ancestors changed it to A, and so Friedan was the prime mover behind the creation of the US's NOW, so NOW, National Organization for Women, which set out to change the gender laws for women, for example, bringing in no-fault divorce, the MARA, maternity rejection right, equal pay for equal work, etc. This organization was highly successful. The leaders of NOW were mostly Jewish women, highly intelligent, with a strong sense of justice and an open-mindedness towards men's gender problems as well. Friedan and I saw eye to eye, pretty much. But when the NOW leadership proposed that custody of children after divorce should be joint by default, there was a massive revolt from the rank-and-file members of NOW, forcing the leaders to bow to the overwhelming pressure. So divorce in the divorce courts became toxic for men ever since. The above description of the toxicity of divorce for men is the main reason for the rise of the MGTOW movement, as men in their tens of millions in Western countries wake up to how shitty a deal that marriage is for men, and hence wipe their hands of it, refusing to marry, rejecting paternity, and spending their money on themselves. This is where we are today, with millions of men going MGTOW, and not quite yet the MGTOW message to men getting onto the broadcast media. Penetration of the broadcast media by the MGTOWs and Masculists is the next obvious stage in male gender politics to spread MGTOW/Masculist ideas. And in brackets, I will devote a lot of my time in 2019 to this task. In bracket. Okay, that's the background. So what is this great new idea? Question mark. The feminazis are called feminazis because men hate them, due to these women's callous, sadistic behaviour towards men in the divorce courts, ruining the lives of a quarter of fathers, a casualty rate far worse than in a major war for men. The feminazis use the divorce courts to inflict their revenge on men. Feminazis are monoconscious and gender and anger biased, being angry at how men oppress women, but not being angry at how women oppress men, because they know nothing about masculist ideas. They are, by definition, monoconscious. Let's jump a few years into the future and imagine that the MGTOW/Masculist media campaign has been quite successful, so that the journalists and media people are really waking up that if the gender laws are not soon menfaired, then indirectly the hated feminazis will wipe out whole populations due to the MGTOW rejection of paternity, due to the feminazi-created toxicity of the divorce courts that they have taken over, making marriage a really shitty deal for men, so men obviously reject marriage. As the MGTOW/Masculist message gets out there, that is, millions of people of both sexes are exposed to these men's lib ideas, that's MGTOW, MRM, Masculism, then millions of women will become biconscious. That is, they will become as familiar with masculist ideas as feminist ideas. They will become as familiar with how women can oppress men, for example, female financial parasitism, female manslavery, fluffy feminist hypocrisy in the divorce courts, female rejection of the para, that's paternity rejection right, forcing women to fip up, etc., as how men oppress women. Now, to come to the new idea. Feminists are mostly female, and 99.5% of women are heterosexual, so most feminists have boyfriends. For these guys to be these feminists' boyfriends, they would need to be male feminists, supporting women's rights, etc. The feminist in the couple would teach her boyfriend about feminist ideas, otherwise the couple would split up. Now, imagine that Masculist/MGTOW ideas spread and spread throughout the culture, and that these male feminist boyfriends become influenced by Masculist ideas, and by definition become biconscious, and now in capital letters, but that their feminist girlfriends don't. I hope you're starting to see where this is going. These newly biconscious boyfriends will start to see their monoconscious feminist girlfriends as bigots, as monoconscious sadists towards men, expecting men to be man-slaves to women, to treat women as princess snowflakes, depriving men of basic human rights, e.g. the paternity rejection right, etc. Millions of such couples will break up as the boyfriend becomes increasingly critical and angry at the sadistic, monoconscious bigotry of his feminist girlfriend and dumps her. Now, you begin to see the enormous power of this idea. The dumped monoconscious feminazi now realizes that, in brackets, to quote a masculist slogan, "Hey, female, if you want to have a kid, you'll have to pay for it yourself," in brackets. Most feminists are fluffy crappers, that is, chose to study fluffy crap majors at high school and college, so are not career competent and incapable of earning good money, expecting, fluffy style, to be able to parasite off the money of a fit male who has bothered to become career competent. Thus the shit hits the fan for her. She realizes she has been dumped by her now masculisted boyfriend, her now biconscious boyfriend, who sees her as a feminazi, a monoconscious bigot, who has learned to despise her for her fluffy feminist hypocrisy. He doesn't deny her feminist beliefs that men can oppress women, because he is, after all, biconscious, that is, he is aware of gender oppression in both directions. What he is intolerant of is her bigotry, that is, against her insistence on thinking that gender oppression is a one-way street, that is, by men against women, that is, against her being closed-minded regarding gender oppression in the opposite direction, thus being anti-masculist, and for that she will pay a very, in capital letters, heavy price. That is, she will be treated as a fluffy by men and increasingly by society, as society becomes ever more sympathetic towards masculist ideas, as the journalists spread masculist ideas to Western countries. You see now the power of the idea. Once former monoconscious male feminist boyfriends of monoconscious feminists become biconscious and their girlfriends do not, then these women will probably lose their boyfriends and hence their support system for having babies. They will have to have babies on their own, and since many of them will be fluffy crappers, they will be poor. We have here the means to destroy third wave feminism. That is, the feminazi doctrine that men are toxic, to be punished, to be spat at. Via this biconscious boyfriends will reject monoconscious feminist girlfriends idea, so there's the label, ad-libbing, society can destroy third wave feminism because it sticks a golden dagger into the heart of the feminazis. Feminazis are still women whose prime goal in life is to have babies. So if masculism teaches men to see such monoconscious feminists as bigots who reject men's gender issues, who are sadistic, narrow-minded and callous, then third wave feminism will die out as the large majority of women reject it, and reject it viscerally because they don't want to be forced to choose between being monoconscious feminazis and between having a support system to have babies, that is, having a man. Thus, not only will men spit on these monoconscious feminazis, but most women will too, but for different reasons. But the effect will be the same. That is, third wave feminism will die out, seen as bigotry, as callousness towards men, and increasingly as dangerous, as genocidal, because the feminazi bitches are indirectly wiping out whole populations due to their takeover of the divorce courts, making marriage and paternity toxic for men, so men reject these traditional roles. If the gender laws are not menfaired, then in the limit, responsible men, masculist soldiers, will go on a sex war, assassinating the gender politicians who created these massively men-unfair, unjust gender laws against men. Will murder thousands of feminazi divorce court lawyers and judges, and will go out into the street and just shoot feminazi vermin as part of the sex war to stop whole populations from crashing. The desperation of the situation will demand desperate measures so that masculine soldiers will wipe out third wave feminism with bullets if necessary, if simple bitch slapping of feminazis fails. But such drastic measures will now not be needed, in my view. I feel with this new idea, this new strategy of the Masculists can be used to persuade third wave feminazis to become biconscious so that they do not lose their newly biconscious boyfriends, so that these third wave feminists can keep their male support system to help them have babies. Now, for the final part of the new idea, quote, with millions of formerly monoconscious feminazis now converted into being biconscious gender libbers, that is, both feminist and female masculist, then menfairing the gender laws will be made much easier. Women's rights committees in parliaments will be converted more readily into gender rights committees, with an equal number of men in them pushing for the menfairing of the gender laws. End quote. The more I think about the longer-term consequences of this idea, the more excited I become as a masculist theorist. I think it is one of the better ideas I've had. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. And in brackets, contains links to 300 plus YouTube masculist essays/videos, and also mimes and BitChute, and to the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 300 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Ciao.